During the early hours of a rainy morning, a lonely businessman receives a desperate message by mistake from a mother who only wanted to feed her son. Moved by something greater than himself, he decides to look for the sender and ends up facing a reality he never imagined. This unlikely encounter will transform their lives forever. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching us from. Let's continue. I promise this will be the best story you will ever hear in your life. The rain fell heavily over Chicago on that early Thursday morning. The drops beat insistently against the windows of the apartment on the 23rd floor, creating a hypnotic melody that echoed through the luxurious and silent space. Robert Harrison had been awake for hours as usual. Sleep had never been generous to him, especially after his mother passed away, leaving a void that no professional achievement could ever fill. At 47, Robert had built an empire in the construction industry. His name was respected in Chicago's business circles, and his projects dotted the city skyline as landmarks of excellence and innovation. But no one knew how much this successful man practiced charity discreetly, helping institutions, sponsoring medical treatments for underprivileged children, and donating anonymously to social projects. It was a silent way to honor the memory of the woman who had raised him alone in a humble neighborhood on the East Side, teaching him that money without purpose was just paper, without a soul. That morning, as he watched the illuminated city below, his phone vibrated on the mahogany desk. Robert frowned. Who would send a message at 3 in the morning? He picked up the device and read the text. That had just arrived. The words, filled with typos and spelling errors, jumped off the screen like a desperate cry for help. Hi, please. I know we don't talk much, but I'm so desperate. Michael is hungry and I don't have money to buy his special formula. He has an intolerance and only this one works. Please, can you lend me $50? I swear I'll pay you back, I promise. But he's crying so much and I can't stand to see my son go hungry. Please help me. Robert reread the message 3 times. He didn't know anyone with a son named Michael. He didn't recognize the number. Clearly it was a mistake. The person who wrote it had likely typed the wrong number in her desperation. The businessman could simply reply, informing her of the error, and go back to his usual insomnia. That would be the reasonable thing to do, the expected, the safe. But something in those words struck a deep chord within him. Perhaps it was the genuine desperation overflowing from every poorly written phrase. Perhaps it was the image of a child crying from hunger while the mother found herself with no way out. Or perhaps it was the memory of his own mother, who had so often spent sleepless nights ensuring he had something to eat, even if she went without. Robert stood up and walked to the panoramic window. The rain continued to fall, the city lights flickering in the distance like terrestrial stars. He closed his eyes and did something he hadn't done in a long time. He prayed. He asked for a sign, a direction, a certainty that this wasn't just a coincidence, but a purpose. When he opened his eyes, the decision was made. He picked up his phone. Again, and using some contacts he had in the tech field, managed to track the approximate origin of the number. The message had come from a neighborhood on the south side, an area he only knew in passing, where simple houses were crowded into narrow streets, where life was hard and opportunities were scarce. Robert dressed quickly. Dark jeans, a simple shirt, comfortable sneakers, nothing that would draw attention. He took the keys to the least conspicuous car he owned, a discreet black sedan, and left the building while the rain was starting to let up. The city was empty, at that hour. The wide avenues, normally congested, now looked like deserted racetracks. Robert drove with determination to a 24-hour pharmacy he knew, a large and well-stocked establishment. Inside, he walked the aisles carefully, filling the cart with cans of special formula for babies with intolerances, diapers of various sizes, wet wipes, ointments, sterilized bottles, pacifiers, a small soft blanket, and even some age-appropriate toys. The cashier, a middle-aged woman with a tired but kind gaze, smiled at the sight of the products. "Your baby is lucky to have such a dedicated father," she commented as she scanned the items. Robert just smiled back, without correcting the mistake. He paid for everything in cash, declined the receipt, and carried the bags to the car. He consulted the address he had managed to associate with the phone number and programmed the GPS. 25 minutes away. 25 minutes that could change everything or mean absolutely nothing. The neighborhood was exactly as he had imagined. Narrow streets, modest houses built close to one another, low fences, simple gates. Lights were still on in a few windows. Dogs barked in the distance as he parked the car in front of the number he was looking for. It was a small house painted a faded blue, with a front window protected by simple bars and an iron gate that had seen better days. Robert took the bags and walked to the gate. He took a deep breath. There was still time to turn back, to consider this madness, to return to his orderly and predictable life. But something greater than reason impelled him to continue. He rang the bell. It took a few minutes before a light came on inside the house. Hurried footsteps approached. A female voice, young and frightened, came from inside. "Who is it? What time is it?" "Good evening. Sorry for the late hour. I received your message," Robert said, keeping his voice calm and respectful. There was silence. Then the door opened just a crack, with the security chain still attached. A young face appeared in the opening. Wide brown eyes, brown hair tied in a messy bun, the tired features of someone who hadn't slept properly in weeks. She must have been about 24 or 25. She was beautiful, despite the exhaustion marking her face. "What message? I don't know you," she said, her voice mixing fear and confusion. "You sent a message asking for help to buy formula for your son Michael. It reached my phone by mistake, but I came to help." Julia Miller looked at this unknown man with total incredulity. She vaguely remembered sending a message in the desperation of the early hours, but she hadn't even realized she might have typed the wrong number. Her phone was old, the cracked screen making it hard to see the digits. And now here was a complete stranger in the middle of the night saying he came to help. "This doesn't make sense. You don't know me." "Why would you come here?" she asked, suspicion showing in every word. "Because your son is hungry and I can help. It's as simple as that." Robert held up the bag so she could see. "I brought special formula, diapers, some other things. I don't want anything in return. I just want to make sure the child will be okay." From the back of the house, a baby's sharp cry pierced the air. Julia closed her eyes, and Robert could see the pain crossing her face. She was at her breaking point, the shame of asking for help, the fear of a stranger, the urgent need to feed her son. Everything collided within her at that moment. "Please," Robert said softly, "I understand your suspicion. I would do the same in your place. But just give me a few minutes. Let me prepare the bottle for Michael and then I'll leave if you want. No strings attached, no obligations." Julia looked at the bags, then at the man, then at the bags again. Inside the house, Michael continued to cry. She made a decision that went against every self-preservation instinct she had developed over years of hardship. She unhooked the chain and opened the door. Robert entered a small and clean living room, despite the evident poverty. The furniture was old, but well cared for. There was no television, just a worn-out sofa, a small coffee table, and in a corner, an improvised crib made from a wooden crate lined with clean blankets. The walls had damp patches, but were decorated with children's drawings cut out from magazines. "The kitchen is this way," Julia indicated, still keeping her distance, still processing the surreal nature of the situation. Robert followed her into a tiny kitchen, a 2-burner stove, a small sink, a refrigerator that made a worrying noise. He placed the bags on the small table and began taking out the products. Julia watched every movement, ready to react at the slightest sign of danger. "Can I use the sink to wash the bottle?" Robert asked, showing one of the new bottles he had bought. Julia nodded, still speechless with shock. He washed the bottle carefully, opened a can of the special formula, read the instructions on the packaging, and prepared the mixture with the precision of someone who had done it before, even if in another life, for another baby who had never been born, from a marriage that never came to be. "Can I feed him?" Robert asked when he finished preparing the bottle. I'll do it." Julia reached out her hands to take the bottle, but Michael was in the bedroom, and she hesitated to leave this stranger alone in her kitchen. Robert understood the dilemma. "I'll go with you to the room. give you the bottle and wait in the living room while you feed him. Then we can talk, if you want, or I'll leave. Whatever is best for you." They walked to the small bedroom. Michael was in the improvised crib, his little face red from crying so much. When he saw the bottle, his little arms reached out instinctively. Julia picked her son up and sat on the edge of the narrow bed that occupied almost the entire space of the room. Robert placed the bottle in her hands and stepped back. "I'll be in the living room," he said, leaving and partially closing the door. Sitting on the old sofa, Robert heard Michael's crying decrease until it stopped completely, replaced by the satisfied sounds of a baby finally feeding. He looked around the simple house and felt something move inside his chest. This was real. This was the real life of millions of people. Not numbers in social responsibility reports, not statistics in newspapers. It was a young mother fighting alone to keep her son alive and well cared for, despite all adversity. A few minutes later, Julia emerged from the room with Michael sleeping in her arms. She placed him back in the improvised crib with infinite gentleness and returned to the living room. For the first time, she looked at Robert with something other than fear or suspicion. It was gratitude mixed with confusion. "Thank you," she said simply, sitting on the other end of the sofa, maintaining a safe distance. "You're welcome. Is he better?" "He's sleeping. He'd been crying for hours. I didn't know what else to do." Julia's voice faltered a bit. "I work as a housekeeper, but there's been little work this month. The money barely covered the rent and bills. I had a little saved for his formula, but the can ran out yesterday and I tried to ask a friend for a loan, but I guess I typed the number wrong." "It wasn't a mistake," Robert said softly. "It was exactly as it was meant to be." Julia looked at him with skepticism. "You don't know me. You don't know my son. Why would you do this? No one does something like this without wanting something in return." Robert leaned back on the sofa and looked at the damp-stained ceiling. "My mother raised me alone. My father abandoned us when I was 2. She worked 3 jobs to give me food, clothes, and school. Many times she went without eating so that I could. She taught me that when you can help someone, you help, without making a fuss, without expecting recognition. You just help because it's the right thing to do." "Your mother sounds like she was an amazing woman," Julia said, her voice softening a bit. She was. She was everything to me." Robert paused. "She passed away 3 years ago. Cancer. It didn't even take long for her to suffer. It was fast, but it left a huge void." "I'm sorry," Julia said, and there was sincerity in her voice. They were silent for a few moments. Outside, the dawn began to brighten, announcing the arrival of a new day. Robert stood up. "I should go, but before I do, I want to make one thing clear. In the bags, there is enough formula for a few weeks, diapers, and some things that might help. Use them without guilt. It's not a loan. You don't need to pay it back. It's a gift for Michael. And if you need anything else, my number is in your phone now. You can reach out to me." Julia also stood up, and for the first time since he had arrived, her eyes filled with tears. "I don't know how to thank you. This is much more than I asked for. It's more than I deserve to receive. You deserve all of this and more. You are a mother fighting to take care of her son. There is no greater merit than that." Robert walked to the door and turned one last time. "Take care of yourself, Julia, and take care of Michael." "How do you know my name?" she asked, surprised. "I managed to track the number. Sorry for the intrusion. I needed to know if it was real, if it wasn't a scam or something like that." Julia nodded, understanding. Robert opened the door and stepped out onto the street that was now beginning to wake up. Some neighbors were already opening windows. The smell of coffee began to scent the air. He got into his car and drove back to his luxurious apartment. But all the way there, his mind was in that humble house, with that baby who could finally sleep with a full belly, and that young mother who fought with all her strength to give her son a dignified life. In the days that followed, Robert couldn't get Julia and Michael out of his head. He worked, attended meetings, signed million-dollar contracts, but a part of him remained in that faded blue house. He wanted to help more, but he knew he had to be discreet, careful. He couldn't simply invade that woman's life and impose his will to help. She had pride, she had dignity, and he respected that deeply. So he began leaving things at her door. Always in the early morning, always discreetly. More baby products, some new clothes, age-appropriate educational toys for Michael, sometimes even a bag of fruit, vegetables, and other groceries. He never left signed notes, only anonymous handwritten messages. For Michael, with love. May he grow up strong and happy. You are an amazing mother. Julia, for her part, was increasingly intrigued and, she admitted to herself, moved. She knew who was leaving those gifts, of course. It couldn't be anyone else. But the discretion, the care not to expose her, not to make her feel like a charity case, touched her deeply. That man was being genuine. And that scared her because she had learned in the worst possible way that men with resources were dangerous, that they always wanted something in return, that nothing in life was free. One Saturday morning, Julia decided she needed to know more about this mysterious benefactor. She asked a neighbor to watch Michael for a few hours and went to a public library in the city. She typed his name into the internet, the name she had seen printed on one of the cards that had accidentally fallen from one of the bags. Robert Harrison. The search results took her breath away. Robert wasn't just a businessman, he was a real estate tycoon. His name was associated with some of the largest developments in Chicago. Luxury buildings, high-end condos, shopping centers. There were photos of him at charity events, always discreet, always in the background of images, never seeking the spotlight. Articles mentioned his anonymous donations, his silent social work. A man who had everything money could buy, but who chose to use his fortune to help those who needed it most. Julia left the library with her head spinning. The abyss between their worlds was even larger than she had imagined. She, a housekeeper who earned just enough to survive. He, a businessman who built skyscrapers. What did that man see in her? Why did he care about her son? The gratitude she felt was immense, but it was also accompanied by a visceral fear. Fear of getting used to that help and then losing it. Fear of starting to depend on it and being abandoned again. Fear of believing in kindness and discovering there was a hidden price. That same afternoon, Julia was in the park near her house with Michael in his stroller when she saw Robert walking toward her. He was dressed casually, in jeans and a simple t-shirt, sunglasses hiding part of his face. When their eyes met, he smiled and waved. Julia felt her heart accelerate. "What a nice coincidence," Robert said, approaching. "May I sit down?" Julia nodded toward the bench next to the stroller. Michael was awake, looking curiously at the world around him with his large, expressive eyes. Robert sat down and looked at the baby with genuine tenderness. "He's bigger," he commented, "and very handsome." "Thank you," Julia replied, her voice tense. "I wanted to thank you for everything you've done. The gifts, the food, everything. But I need to understand. Why?" Robert took off his sunglasses and looked directly at her. His eyes were kind, honest. "Because I can. Because when I saw your message, I felt it was what I was supposed to do. There's nothing beyond that, Julia. I don't want anything in return. I have no ulterior motives. I just want to help you and Michael have a slightly easier life. But you don't know me. I could be anyone. I could be lying. I could be using you." "You could," Robert agreed, "but you aren't. I see it in your eyes, in the way you care for your son, in your impeccably clean house despite having almost nothing. You are a person of character, and people like that deserve to be helped." Julia felt tears threatening to fall. "I don't want to get used to this and then lose it. I don't want Michael to get used to it and then have you disappear. We've already lost too many people in our lives." "His father?" Robert asked gently. Julia nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "When he found out I was pregnant, he disappeared, said he wasn't ready to be a father, that I should handle it alone. He blocked my number, moved cities. I never heard from him again. And before him there were others who promised the moon and stars but only wanted to take advantage. I learned not to trust men's promises, especially from men with money." Robert was silent for a moment, processing those words. "I understand your pain. and I understand your suspicion. I won't promise that I will never disappear because empty promises mean nothing, but I will show you through actions that I am different. I'm in no hurry. We can go slow. You set the pace. If you want me to step away, I'll step away. If you want me to keep helping, I'll keep helping. No pressure, no demands. Julia looked at Michael, who was now observing Robert with childish interest. The baby stretched his little arms toward him, a spontaneous and innocent gesture. Robert looked at Julia, asking for silent permission. She hesitated for only a second before nodding affirmatively. Robert picked Michael up carefully, with the gentleness of someone who knows he is holding something precious and fragile. The baby looked at him with curiosity, touched his face with his tiny hands, and to Julia's surprise gave a little giggle. "I think he likes you," she commented, a shy smile appearing on her lips. "Babies have an incredible instinct for recognizing good people," Robert said, rocking Michael gently. "They don't let themselves be fooled by appearances or pretty words. They feel it." Julia watched the scene with a mix of emotions she couldn't completely name. There was tenderness there in that powerful man holding her son as if it were the most natural thing in the world. There was care. There was something genuine she wasn't used to seeing. "Do you have children?" she asked, realizing she knew very little about this man who had entered her life in such an unusual way. Robert shook his head, a flash of sadness crossing his face. "No. I almost did many years ago. I was engaged, my life was starting to go well in business. She got pregnant. I was over the moon, planning everything, imagining what it would be like to be a father. But she had a complication in the 3rd month and lost the baby. It was devastating for both of us. The relationship didn't survive the pain. We each handled the loss differently and ended up drifting apart. She married another man years later and has children now, from what I know. I'm happy for her. As for me, I dove into work and never allowed anyone to get that close again." "Until now?" Julia asked softly. Robert looked at her, then at Michael, and smiled. "Until now." The meetings in the park became a routine over the following weekends. Julia and Michael would arrive in the morning, and Robert would show up as if he were just casually strolling. They talked about everything and nothing. She told him about her days as a housekeeper, the families she worked for, the funny and sad stories she collected. He shared details about his work, the challenges of running a large company, the loneliness he felt even when surrounded by employees and partners. Julia began to see beyond the wealth and social standing. She saw a man who had grown up in adversity, who knew hunger and struggle, who hadn't forgotten his roots despite his success. A man who treated the janitor of his building with the same respect he treated his executives. A man who preferred a diner burger to a dinner at a Michelin-starred restaurant. Robert, in turn, admired Julia's strength. She was only 24, but she possessed a maturity forged in hardship. She had been raised in a religious home with hard-working parents who always emphasized the importance of dignity and honest work. When she got pregnant at 23, her parents, conservative Christians, found it hard to accept that she would have a child out of wedlock. The distance was painful, but Julia chose her son above all else. "They still haven't met Michael," she said one afternoon, as they watched the baby play with a colorful rattle Robert had brought. "My mother calls sometimes, asks how I am, but always with that voice full of judgment. My father doesn't even do that. To him, I disgraced the family, as if raising my son with love and dedication were a reason for shame." "They will regret it," Robert said with conviction. "One day they will realize they lost precious time with their grandson because of pride and prejudice, and they'll want to get that time back, but they won't be able to. Do you think I should reach out to them? Try to reconcile? I think you should do what your heart tells you, but you shouldn't beg for their acceptance. You didn't do anything wrong. You had a son. You're raising that son with love, working honestly to support you both. That's a reason for pride, not shame." Robert's words echoed in Julia for days. She realized she was starting to see herself differently, no longer as a victim of circumstances, but as a warrior who faced each day with courage. And part of that transformation was due to that man who had appeared in her life like an angel disguised as a businessman. Michael was also changing. The baby, who was once quieter and prone to crying due to constant hunger, was now developing well. He had gained weight, his skin had a healthy glow, his eyes sparkled with curiosity and joy, and he had clearly created a special bond with Robert. Whenever he saw him, he would reach out his little arms, give little shouts of joy, and only calm down when he was in his lap. "He loves you," Julia commented one Sunday, as they walked through the park with Michael sleeping in Robert's arms. "I've never seen him get attached to someone like this." "The feeling is mutual," Robert replied, looking at the baby with deep tenderness. "I can't explain it, Julia, but when I look at him I feel a connection that goes beyond logic, as if he were mine somehow. I know it sounds strange." "It doesn't sound strange," she said quietly. "It sounds beautiful." It was on a Tuesday night that everything changed. Julia was at home. She had just finished bathing Michael when she noticed he was warmer than usual. She put her hand on the baby's forehead and felt the feverish heat. Instant panic took over. Michael had never been sick before. She didn't know what to do. She gave him the fever reducer she had at home, but the fever wouldn't go down. The baby began to cry, a different cry of pain and discomfort. Julia called the public clinic, but it was night and the emergency room was packed. They told her she would have to wait hours to be seen, hours she felt she didn't have. Without thinking, she picked up her phone and dialed Robert's number. Her hands were shaking so much she almost dropped the device. He answered on the second ring. "Julia, is everything okay?" "Robert, Michael has a high fever and I don't know what to do. The medicine isn't working. And he's crying so much and I'm so scared." The words came out in a rush, mixed with tears. "Take a deep breath. I'm coming right now. I'm leaving. 10 minutes. His voice was firm, steady, exactly what she needed to hear. Robert arrived in less than 10 minutes. He entered the house and went straight to where Julia was holding Michael. The baby was red, crying weakly, clearly unwell. Robert touched his forehead and frowned. "We're going to the hospital, now. Grab a change of clothes for him and for yourself. Let's go." "But the public hospital will take hours and I don't have money for a private one," Julia began, but Robert interrupted her gently. "We're going to the private pediatrician who sees my nephew. He's excellent and he's nearby. Don't worry about money right now. The important thing is taking care of Michael." In the car, as Robert drove skillfully through the still busy streets, Julia held Michael and tried to calm him. The baby whimpered softly, and every sound hurt the mother's heart, like a stab wound. "It's going to be okay," Robert said, alternating his gaze between the road and the rearview mirror where he saw mother and son. "Dr. Henry Stevens is the best. He'll figure out what it is and treat it." The clinic was discreet but clearly high-end. When they arrived, Robert simply spoke with the receptionist, and minutes later they were in a comfortable and well-equipped consultation room. Dr. Henry was a man in his 60s, with graying hair and a kind, experienced gaze. "Robert, it's been a while," he greeted the businessman, but quickly focused his attention on Michael. "And who is this young warrior?" "Michael, son of a very special friend. He has a high fever that isn't responding to medication." Dr. Henry examined Michael with care and competence. He checked his temperature, ears, throat, and lung sounds. Julia answered his questions about symptoms, diet, and history. The doctor was attentive and reassuring. "It's an ear infection," he finally diagnosed. "Quite common in babies this age. I'll prescribe an antibiotic and an anti-inflammatory. With the correct treatment, in 48 hours he'll already be much better. But we need to monitor him. I want to see him again in 3 days." Julia felt relief flooding her body. "Thank you, doctor. Thank you so much." At the clinic's own pharmacy, Robert bought all the prescribed medications and some other items the doctor suggested. When they went to pay for the consultation, he had already settled everything discreetly. Julia tried to protest, but he just shook his head. "Not today, Julia. Let me take care of this. You're already worried enough. You don't need to worry about money, too." On the way back home, with Michael already medicated and calmer, Julia cried silently in the passenger seat. They weren't tears of desperation, but of gratitude, of relief, of an emotion so deep she had no words to describe it. "Thank you," she said when they arrived in front of her house. "Thank you for answering my call. for dropping everything and coming, for taking care of him as if he were your own son. I will never forget this." Robert looked at her with an intensity that made Julia's heart race. "You don't need to thank me. It was exactly where I wanted to be. There's nowhere I'd rather be than here, helping you and Michael." He insisted on coming in and helping her give the first dose of medicine. He stayed until he was sure the baby was comfortable and sleeping. Only then did he prepare to leave. "Anything, any change, you call me. Doesn't matter the time, I'll come," he said at the door. "I know, and that means more than you can imagine." After that night, something changed between them. The invisible barrier Julia maintained began to crumble. She realized Robert wasn't a threat. He wasn't someone who wanted to take advantage of her. He was someone genuinely concerned about her well-being and that of her son, someone she could trust. The meetings in the park continued, but now they also happened in other places. Robert took Julia and Michael on outings she never imagined going on. One Saturday they went to the Brookfield Zoo. Michael was marveled by the animals, especially the monkeys making funny faces. Julia laughed more that day than she had in years. Another weekend they visited the Children's Museum. Even though Michael was too small to understand, Robert wanted him to start having enriching experiences early on. "It's about creating memories," he explained. "Even if he doesn't remember consciously, these experiences shape who he will become." Julia began to realize she was seeing Robert in a different way. It wasn't just gratitude she felt anymore. It was admiration. It was affection. It was something she tried to deny, but that grew with every meeting, every conversation, every time she saw that powerful man get down on the ground to play with her son. One Sunday afternoon, they were at Lincoln Park. Michael was in Robert's lap, both watching the ducks in the pond. Julia watched them from a nearby bench. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It was such a perfect scene, so much like a real family, that Julia's heart ached. "Are you okay?" Robert asked, noticing the expression on her face. "I was just thinking," she said, hesitant, "about how life can change in unexpected ways. 2 months ago I was alone, desperate, not knowing how I was going to feed my son. And now?" "And now?" Robert encouraged. "And now I feel like I have someone, that I'm not alone anymore. And that scares me as much as it makes me happy." Robert sat down next to her, with Michael still in his lap. "Why does it scare you?" "Because I'm afraid of getting used to it. I'm afraid of starting to depend on this happiness and then losing it. I'm afraid of waking up one day and you've disappeared, and I'll have to explain to Michael why that man he loves like a father doesn't come to see us anymore." "Julia, look at me." She raised her eyes, meeting his sincere gaze. "I'm not going to disappear. This isn't about charity. It isn't about pity. It's about the two of you becoming an essential part of my life. When I wake up in the morning, I think of you. During the day, I catch myself smiling, remembering something funny Michael did or something you said. At night, before I sleep, I'm grateful for receiving that wrong message that changed everything. You two filled a void I didn't even know I had. But what if it doesn't work out? What if you realize we're from very different worlds? You're a successful businessman. You go to places I don't even know exist. You know important people. I'm a housekeeper with an incomplete high school education who lives in a rented house where the roof leaks when it rains. And you think that matters to me?" Robert asked, his voice thick with emotion. "Julia, I've spent the last 15 years surrounded by people at my social level. Women with degrees from expensive universities, brilliant careers, designer clothes. Do you know what all of them lacked? Authenticity, character, true strength. You have more value in your pinky finger than all of them combined. You're raising a son alone, working hard, maintaining your dignity, even in the worst circumstances. That is much more impressive than any degree or bank account." Tears streamed down Julia's face. "I don't know if I deserve this. I don't know if I deserve you. You deserve this and much more, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving that to you if you'll let me." Julia's heart was beating so hard she was sure he could hear it. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I've fallen in love with you. I don't know exactly when it happened. Maybe it was that first night, when I saw the strength and vulnerability mixed in your eyes. Maybe it was in the park when you laughed for the first time and the world seemed brighter. Or maybe it was gradual, a little bit every day, until one day I woke up and realized that you and Michael were all I wanted. I'm not asking for anything right now, I'm just being honest about how I feel. Julia was speechless. Part of her wanted to run, to protect her heart, to avoid the possibility of being hurt again. But a larger part, a part that was tired of being afraid, wanted to surrender to that feeling, to believe that true love stories could happen in real life, not just in movies. I'm falling in love with you too, she finally admitted, her voice trembling. And it terrifies me because I've been hurt before. I've believed in promises that weren't kept, but when I'm with you, when I see how you treat my son, how you treat me, I want to believe it's possible. I want to believe in us. Robert held her hand, interlacing their fingers. Michael, as if sensing the importance of the moment, looked at the two of them and gave a little giggle, clapping his hands. They laughed, the tension breaking. We can go slow, Robert suggested. No rush. Building this together, at our pace. What do you think? I think so. I think I want to try. In the following weeks, the relationship between them flourished, in a natural and beautiful way. Robert continued to be respectful, never pushing, always letting Julia set the boundaries. He understood she needed time to trust fully, to believe that this was real and lasting. He took her to simple dinners in places where she felt comfortable, pizzerias, casual diners, neighborhood cafes, places where they could talk without the weight of overly formal environments. She gradually began to open up more, telling him about her dreams, her fears, her hopes for Michael's future. I want him to study, she said one night as they shared a cheese pizza in a modest restaurant. I want him to have all the opportunities I didn't have. I want him to choose what he wants to be, not out of necessity, but out of passion. He will have all of that, Robert assured her. I will personally guarantee it. It's not your responsibility, Julia protested, still fighting the habit of refusing help. And what if I want it to be? What if I want to be part of his life in every possible way? Julia looked at him, her heart racing. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that maybe it's time we start pretending. This is temporary. I'm suggesting we admit that what we have is special. It's real and it deserves to be taken seriously. Robert, you don't have to answer right now. Just think about what I said. Think about the possibility of us building something permanent together, you, me, and Michael, a real family. The word family echoed in Julia's mind for days. It was all she ever wanted for her son. A stable, loving, present family, someone who would be a father figure, who would teach him things from man to man, who would be there for all the important moments. And Robert already was that. He already treated Michael like a son. He was already present in every stage of the baby's development. One morning, Julia woke up with absolute clarity. She picked up the phone and called Robert. Good morning, he answered, his voice still raspy with sleep. I want to try, she said bluntly. I want to build a family with you. I want us to be real, official, true. I don't know how it will be. I don't know all the steps, but I know I want to try. With you. The silence on the other end of the line lasted only a few seconds, but it felt like an eternity. Then Robert replied, his voice thick with emotion. You just made me the happiest man in the world. Julia's decision to surrender completely to that relationship marked the beginning of a new phase in their lives. Robert, respectful as always, didn't rush anything. They continued to meet regularly, but now there was a different lightness between them. No longer the tension of uncertainty, but the tranquility of knowing they were building something solid. It was Robert who suggested that Julia see his apartment. I don't want you to feel pressured, he said cautiously, but I'd like you to see where I live, to know more about my life. We can go during the day when you feel comfortable. Julia accepted, curious, but also nervous. She knew the apartment would be luxurious, but nothing prepared her for the reality. When the private elevator doors opened directly into the apartment's foyer, she was speechless. The space was enormous, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the Chicago skyline. Designer furniture, artwork on the walls, an impeccable decor that looked like it came out of a magazine. "It's so big," she commented, holding Michael in her arms, feeling tiny in that immense environment. "It's empty," Robert corrected, looking around as if seeing the place for the first time. It was always just a place to sleep. It was never a home. A home needs life, laughter, love. This here is just an expensive apartment. He took her to see every room, the office filled with bookshelves, the gourmet kitchen he rarely used, the terrace with a garden where he could install toys for Michael. And then, with some hesitation, he opened the door to a room he always kept closed. It was a room decorated for a baby. A noble wood crib, delicate mobiles, a nursing chair in the corner, shelves with some stuffed animals still with tags, everything covered by a thin layer of dust, frozen in time. "It was meant to be my son's room," Robert explained, his voice heavy. "When my fiancée lost the baby, I couldn't bring myself to dismantle it. I locked the door and never went in again, until today." Julia felt tears in her eyes. She approached Robert and held his hand. He would have been very loved. He would have been, Robert agreed. But maybe everything happens for a reason. Maybe I needed to wait for you, wait for Michael. Looking at the room, an idea began to form in Robert's mind. What if we transformed this space into something new? Not to erase the past, but to honor it by creating a future. We can redecorate together, make this Michael's room when you're here. "When we're here," Julia repeated, surprised. "Eventually, when you feel ready. Not now, not tomorrow. But one day I hope you and Michael will make this apartment, or any house we choose together, our home." The proposal was tempting and terrifying at the same time. Julia still lived in her little rented house, still worked as a housekeeper, still maintained her independence. The idea of moving into that world of luxury made her insecure. "I'm afraid of losing who I am," she confessed. "I'm afraid of becoming someone I don't recognize." "You could never stop being yourself," Robert assured her. "Your essence, your strength, your character, that doesn't change because of an address or a bank account. And I would never ever want you to change. It's exactly who you are that made me fall in love." In the following weeks, they worked together on transforming the room. Julia chose bright colors, educational themes, decorations that encouraged child development. Robert hired the best professionals, but it was Julia who gave the space its soul. Every detail reflected love and care. Meanwhile, the routine of the three of them continued to solidify. Robert began picking her up from work a few times a week. He met the families she worked for and discreetly ensured they valued her properly, suggesting pay increases that reflected the quality of her service. Julia never knew he was behind those improvements. Michael turned 9 months old and was becoming smarter and more active every day. He started crawling, exploring the world around him with insatiable curiosity, and Robert was present for every important milestone. It was he who saw Michael's first wobbly steps, holding the baby by his little hands and celebrating as if it were the greatest achievement in the world. "Did you see? Did you see?" Robert exclaimed, with more enthusiasm than Michael himself. "He walked 4 steps. Julia, did you see?" She laughed at his excitement, at the pure and genuine love that showed in every gesture. It was impossible to deny that Robert loved Michael like a father loves a son, and Michael reciprocated with equal intensity, calling Robert Rob in his childish attempt to pronounce the name. It was on a Friday night, during a simple dinner at Julia's house, that Robert brought up a delicate subject. "We need to talk about Michael's future," he began, choosing his words carefully. "Specifically about his legal situation." Julia tensed up. "What do you mean? The father's name isn't on the birth certificate, right?" "It's not. He disappeared before Michael was born. He never showed any interest in being a father." "And does that worry you? For his future?" "Of course it worries me. Michael will grow up and ask questions. He'll want to know who his father is, why he's not present. And I don't know how I'll explain that his father simply didn't want to know about his existence." Robert took a deep breath, preparing for what he was about to say. What if he had a present father? Someone who loves him, who is here every day, who wants to be part of every moment of his life. Someone who wants to officially take on that responsibility. Julia looked at him, her heart racing. Robert, what are you saying? I'm saying that I want to adopt Michael. I want to be his legal father. I want him to have my name, my rights, my complete protection. Not just as an informal father figure, but as a father, in fact, and in law. Tears fell freely down Julia's face. Are you sure? It's a huge responsibility. It's forever. I am absolutely sure. Julia, I already love this boy as if he were my biological son. I already think of him as my son. I already plan my future, including him in every step. The only thing missing is the official paper, and I want that paper. I want to be able to make medical decisions if necessary. I want to be able to enroll him in school. I want him to know, without a shadow of a doubt, that he has a father who chose him, who wanted him, who fought to be part of his life. But what about us? What if one day things don't work out between us? Would you still want this responsibility? Robert held her hands firmly. Julia, I need to tell you something important. My relationship with Michael doesn't depend on my relationship with you. Of course, I hope with all my heart that we stay together forever. But if for some reason I can't imagine we don't, I still want to be Michael's father. I still want to be part of his life. This commitment is to him, independent of anything else. The declaration touched Julia deeply. It wasn't about possessing her through the child. It was about genuinely loving that child, regardless of the circumstances. I need to think, she said, still processing everything. It's not that I don't trust. Phew. It's just that this is huge. It's legally changing my son's life. I need to be sure it's what's best for him. I perfectly understand. Think it over calmly. I'm in no hurry. The offer has no expiration date. Julia spent the following days pondering. She talked to some close friends, the neighbor who watched Michael sometimes, even her old high school teacher. They all said the same thing. Michael was lucky. He had a wonderful man wanting to be his father. A man who not only had the resources to give him a comfortable life, but who genuinely loved him. The decision crystallized one afternoon when Julia was in the park with Michael. The baby saw a man playing ball with an older child and pointed excitedly. "Rob! Rob!" he shouted, confusing any tall man with the father figure he knew. At that moment, Julia understood. Michael already saw Robert as a father, and to deny him the formalization of that relationship would be to deny her son the security and love he deserved. That night, she called Robert. "I want you to adopt Michael. I want you to be his father officially. He already loves you as a father. You already love him as a son. Let's make it official." The joy in Robert's voice was palpable. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's start the process." The following months were filled with paperwork, interviews with social workers, and home visits. The adoption process was complex, but Robert hired the best lawyers to ensure everything was done correctly. Throughout the process, it became clear to everyone involved that this was a special situation. A man who genuinely wanted to be a father, a mother who completely supported the decision, and a child who clearly had a deep bond with his future adoptive father. It was during this period that Robert realized a fundamental piece of the puzzle was missing. He and Julia were building a family, but they weren't officially together. He loved her with every fiber of his being. He wanted to spend the rest of his life by her side, and he wanted to do it the right way, traditionally, with all the commitment and seriousness she deserved. He began planning in secret. He talked to jewelers, choosing the most beautiful ring he could find. Not the most expensive, but the most meaningful. A white gold, band with a modest diamond, delicate, perfect for the practical and unpretentious woman Julia was. He planned the moment carefully. He didn't want anything flashy or public that would make her uncomfortable. He wanted something intimate, special, full of meaning. He chose the park where they had met for the first time after that rainy dawn, where they had built the foundations of their relationship, where Michael had taken his first steps, where so many important conversations had happened. On a Saturday afternoon, he invited Julia for a picnic. She thought it was strange, as they had never done that before, but she agreed, intrigued. Robert prepared everything personally, a basket with treats he knew she loved, mini sandwiches, chocolate cookies, fresh fruit, natural juice, a checkered blanket to spread on the grass, some toys for Michael. They chose a spot under a leafy tree overlooking the pond where they used to feed the ducks. Michael played happily with the new toys Robert had brought. Julia bit into a sandwich and watched the scene with contentment. "This is perfect," she commented. "I don't need expensive restaurants or luxury parties. This right here, the three of us, is all I need." "That's exactly why. I love you," Robert said, his voice thick with emotion. He stood up and, to Julia's surprise, knelt on the grass in front of her. He pulled a small blue velvet box from his pocket. Julia's heart raced. "Julia Miller," he began, his voice trembling slightly. "A few months ago I received a message that completely changed my life. I thought it was a mistake, a slip of fate. But now I know it was the universe, or God, or whatever governs our lives, directing me to where I was always meant to be. With you, with Michael, building a family." Tears were already streaming down Julia's face. Michael, realizing something important was happening, stopped playing and watched with his big, curious eyes. "You taught me what true love is. Not the love from movies, perfect and uncomplicated, but real love which is built day after day, which overcomes fears and insecurities, which chooses to stay even when it would be easier to leave. You showed me that wealth has nothing to do with money, that a person can have everything and have nothing, or have nothing and have everything. And you, with your strength, your dignity, your unconditional love for your son, you have everything that really matters." Robert opened the box, revealing the delicate ring that sparkled under the afternoon light. "Marry me, Julia. Let me be not only Michael's father legally, but your husband officially. Let's build a real family with papers, commitments, vows. I don't promise a perfect life because perfection doesn't exist, but I promise to be by your side at all times, through the good and the bad. I promise to honor you, respect you, and love you and Michael every day of my life. Will you marry me?" Julia was crying so hard she could barely speak. Her hands were shaking. Her heart was beating so fast it hurt. She looked at Robert, at the ring, at Michael, who was watching the scene with childish interest, and then back to Robert. "Yes," she finally managed to say. "Yes, I'll marry you. 1,000 times yes." Robert slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made especially for her, which indeed it had. He stood up and pulled her into a tight hug. Michael, not wanting to be left out, stretched out his little arms, and the two included. Him in the embrace. The three of them together, united, a family in every sense. "Rob, Mommy," Michael babbled, clapping his hands as if he understood the importance of that moment. "That's right, champ," Robert said, picking him up. "Now we're a real family. Daddy, Mommy, and you." The words Daddy and Mommy sounded so natural, so right, that Julia felt a deep peace invade her heart. For the first time in a long time, she felt she was exactly where she was supposed to be. In the days that followed, the wedding preparations began. Julia wanted something simple, intimate. She didn't want a spectacle or ostentation. Robert fully agreed. After all, what mattered wasn't the grandeur of the event, but the meaning of the commitment they were making. They decided to hold the ceremony in a small chapel Julia occasionally attended in the neighborhood where she lived. It was a humble place, with simple wooden pews and modest decoration, but it was where she felt at home, where she felt close to God. The guest list was small, a few close colleagues of Robert's, Julia's fellow housekeepers, the neighbor who watched Michael, Dr. Henry, and his wife. And after much hesitation, Julia decided to invite her parents. "They might not come," she told Robert, her voice heavy with old pain. "They might refuse. But I need to try. I need to give them the chance to meet their grandson, to see that I've built a good, dignified life. Whatever their decision, I'll be by your side," Robert assured her. The invitation was sent. A week passed in silence. Julia had already given up on receiving a response when, one afternoon, her phone rang. It was her mother. "Julia." The older woman's voice sounded different, less harsh, softer. "Mom, we received the invitation. Your father and I we talked a lot. About everything, about how we treated you, about the choices we made." There was a long pause. "We were very hard on you, very judgmental. And we lost precious time with our grandson because of pride and prejudice. If you still want us to go to the wedding, we would very much like to be there, and to meet Michael, and this man who is going to be our son-in-law." Julia held the phone so tightly her fingers turned white. "I would love for you to come, very much. Then we'll be there. And Julia, I'm sorry. For everything." The wedding day dawned with a clear blue sky without a single cloud. Julia woke up early at a friend's house, where she had spent the night according to tradition. She looked at herself in the mirror as her friend adjusted her simple but beautiful white dress, made of delicate lace, which Robert had insisted on paying for, chosen by her in a modest downtown shop. "You look beautiful," the friend said, adjusting the short veil. "I'm nervous," Julia admitted. "What if it's all a dream? What if I wake up and find out none of this is real?" "It's real. I saw the way that man looks at you. It's very real." At the chapel, Robert waited at the altar with Michael in his arms. The baby was dressed in a tiny suit that made him look like a gentleman in miniature. He was restless, looking at the door, waiting for his mother. The guests were few, but each one present meant something special. Dr. Henry and his wife, who had accompanied Michael's health journey. Julia's housekeeper friends, who had supported her through the most difficult times. The kind neighbor, who so often watched the baby. And in the last pew, with mixed expressions of regret and hope, Julia's parents. When the music began and Julia appeared at the chapel door, Robert felt the air leave his lungs. She was radiant. Not because of the dress or the simple makeup, but because of the sparkle in her eyes, the genuine smile, the peace that emanated from her entire being. Michael, upon seeing his mother, began to squirm in Robert's arms, wanting to go to her. "Mommy! Mommy!" he called, stretching out his little arms. Julia laughed through her tears and quickened her pace. When she reached the altar, Robert lowered himself so that Michael could hug her. The three joined in an embrace, and only after that did the priest begin the ceremony. "We are gathered here," the priest began, his warm voice filling the small chapel, "to celebrate the union of two souls who found each other in an unusual way, but who were clearly destined to be together. Robert and Julia, you have chosen each other not just as partners, but as family. And this child," he gestured toward Michael, "is living proof that true love knows no limits or conditions." The vows were simple but deeply emotional. Robert spoke first, his voice firm despite the tears flowing freely. "Julia, when I received that message by mistake, I had no idea I was receiving the greatest gift of my life. You taught me that home isn't a place but people, that wealth isn't what we have in the bank but what we have in our hearts. I promise to love you and Michael every day of my life, through the good days and the hard days, in sickness and in health, in wealth and in poverty. Though that last part isn't very likely," he joked, drawing laughter from the small congregation. "I promise to be the husband you deserve and the father Michael deserves, today and always." Julia wiped away her tears before beginning to speak, but new ones came before she even opened her mouth. "Robert, you appeared in my life when I was at rock bottom, when I saw no way out, when I thought I would have to face everything alone forever. But you didn't just help me materially. You showed me that I was worthy of love, that I was strong, that I could dream of a better future for myself and my son. I promise to be the wife you deserve, the partner who will support you at all times. I promise to honor you, respect you, and love you with all my heart. You chose to be Michael's father when you had no obligation to be, and that showed me the kind of man you are, a man of character, of honor, of true love. I am blessed to have you in my life, and I will spend every day proving that I am worthy of this blessing." There wasn't a dry eye. In the chapel, even the priest had to pause to compose himself before proceeding. By the words spoken, the vows made, and the love that clearly exists between you, I declare you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride. Robert held Julia's face delicately and kissed her with tenderness. Michael, still between them, clapped and laughed, delighted by the scene. The guests applauded, some crying openly. After the ceremony, there was a small reception in a simple hall next to the chapel. Homemade cake made by Julia's friends, finger food, soda and juice. Nothing elaborate, but full of love and joy. Michael was the center of attention, crawling among the guests, distributing smiles and winning hearts. It was during the reception that Julia's parents finally approached. Her mother, a middle-aged woman with graying hair and eyes just like her daughter's, looked at Michael with tears running down her face. "May I hold him?" she asked timidly. Julia hesitated for only a second before nodding positively. Her mother took Michael in her arms and looked at him as if she was seeing a miracle. "He's beautiful, perfect, and I lost so much time. But you don't have to lose any more," Julia said softly. "He's here. We're here." Her father, a man of stern appearance who now seemed only old and tired, approached as well. "Julia, I don't know how to ask for forgiveness for what we did, for the way we treated you. You were going through a difficult time, and instead of supporting you, we judged you. We pushed you away when you needed us most." "Dad, no, let me finish. You proved that you are stronger than I ever was. You raised this boy alone, worked hard, and kept your dignity. And you found a good man who truly loves you. I'm proud of you. I should have said that a long time ago, but I'm saying it now. I'm very proud of you." Julia hugged her father, years of hurt and resentment beginning to dissolve. It wouldn't be an instant process. It would take time to rebuild that relationship, but there at that moment it was a beginning. Robert watched the scene from afar, happy to see Julia reconciling with her parents. Dr. Henry approached him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You did something very special here, Robert. You built a family from nothing. You gave this woman and this child something that money can't buy." "They gave me much more than I gave them," Robert replied. "They gave me purpose. They gave me a reason to wake up happy every morning. They gave me a real home." The simple party continued until early evening. When everyone had already left, Robert, Julia, and Michael were alone in the silent chapel. They sat on one of the pews, Michael finally sleeping in Julia's arms, exhausted from so much excitement. "We're a family now," Julia whispered, looking at the ring on her finger. "Officially, legally, in every way." "The best family I could have asked for," Robert agreed, putting his arm around her shoulders. That night, they went to Robert's apartment for the first time as a family. Michael's room, now fully redecorated, awaited them. Robert placed the baby delicately in the new crib, and the two stood there watching him sleep. "Thank you," Julia whispered, "for everything, for not giving up on us, for choosing us, for loving us. Thank you for letting me be part of your lives, for trusting me, for giving me a family." And there, in that room filled with love and hope, they sealed the commitment they had made, not just as husband and wife, but as parents, as partners, as companions on the journey. A family that was born from a typo, but that turned out to be exactly what they all needed to be complete. The first months of marriage were a sweet and transformative period of adaptation. Julia still worked as a housekeeper, despite Robert's gentle protests. She needed to maintain her independence, her own identity. But now she divided her time between the little house she had rented for so long and the luxurious apartment that was now also her home. "You don't have to choose one or the other yet," Robert had said, when she expressed her confusion about where she really lived. "The transition can be gradual, in your time, at your pace." Eventually, however, practicality won out. Maintaining two places didn't make sense, especially with Michael growing and needing more space. The final move to the apartment happened naturally, without pressure, when Julia finally felt ready. But it wasn't just them moving. Julia insisted on taking some furniture from the little house, the worn-out sofa where she had so often nursed Michael in the difficult early hours, the coffee table where he had learned to stand. Those simple objects gained a place of honor in the luxurious apartment, creating a perfect fusion between the two worlds that were now becoming one. Robert also made changes in his life. He delegated more responsibilities to his trusted partners and started working fewer hours. He wanted to be present for Michael, for Julia, for the family he had built. He had enough money for several lifetimes. Time was the most precious resource now. The adoption process finally concluded when Michael turned 1 year old. The day Robert officially became the boy's legal father was as emotional as the wedding day. At the courthouse, with Julia by his side, Robert held Michael in his arms as the judge declared the adoption complete. "Congratulations, Mr. Harrison," the judge said with a smile. "You are now officially the father of Michael Miller Harrison." Michael Miller Harrison. The name sounded perfect. It carried the strength of the mother and the protection of the father. It was the physical representation of the family they had built together. "Thank you," Robert said, his voice breaking, "for giving me this opportunity, for allowing me to be the father of this incredible boy. Mr. Harrison, after all the interviews and evaluations, I can say with certainty that Michael is the one lucky to have you as a father. I've seen many adoption cases in my career, but few with as much genuine love as what you two demonstrate." That night, at home, Robert put Michael to bed and stood watching him sleep for long minutes. "My son," he whispered. "Officially, legally, and in every sense that matters, you are my son." It was a few months later, when Michael was a year and a half old, that Julia began feeling familiar symptoms: morning nausea, excessive fatigue, sensitivity to certain smells. Initially, she tried to ignore it, but when the symptoms persisted, she took a pregnancy test. 2 lines. Pregnant. Julia sat on the bathroom floor looking at the test, feeling an avalanche of emotions. Joy, fear, excitement, anxiety. All at once. She was pregnant. She would have another child. Michael would have a brother or sister. And this time, she wouldn't be alone. She would have a husband by her side, a partner to share the worries and joys. When Robert arrived home from work that night, Julia was in the kitchen preparing dinner with Michael playing on the floor nearby. She had planned a creative way to tell him the news, but seeing him, all the preparation went out the window. "I'm pregnant," she simply blurted out before he even took off his jacket. Robert froze. He blinked. He looked at her. "What?" "I'm pregnant. I found out today. I took 3 tests to be sure. I'm pregnant." Robert's face went through several expressions in seconds. Shock, incredulity, and then pure and absolute joy. He crossed the distance between them in 2 long strides and picked her up in his arms, spinning her in the air. "We're having a baby? Our own baby?" "We're having a baby," Julia confirmed, laughing and crying at the same time. Robert put her back on the ground and knelt, placing his hands delicately on her still flat belly. "Hi, baby. This is your daddy. We don't know who you are yet, if you're a boy or a girl, but we already love you very much. You're going to have the best big brother in the world." He looked at Michael, who was watching curiously, and the best mother anyone could ask for. Michael, sensing something important was happening, crawled over to them and placed his small hand on his mother's belly, too. "Baby," he said, one of the new words he was learning. "That's right, champ. There's going to be a baby in here, a little brother or a little sister for you." Julia's pregnancy was completely different from the first one. This time, she had all the necessary medical support. Dr. Henry referred her to the best obstetrician in Chicago. She had all her exams on time, took all the recommended vitamins, and had a balanced diet. There was no worry about money for formula or diapers. There was peace, security, and love. Robert was present for every ultrasound, every consultation. He held her hand when she felt nauseous, massaged her swollen feet at the end of the day, and fulfilled all her strange culinary cravings in the middle of the night. When they found out it would be a girl, Julia cried with emotion. "A girl. I'm going to have a daughter." "We're going to have a daughter," Robert corrected, kissing her forehead. "And she's going to be as strong and amazing as her mother." They chose the name together on a rainy afternoon while Michael slept. They flipped through books of names, discussed meanings, and tested how each name sounded with Harrison. "Lauren," Julia suggested finally. "Lauren means victory, and this pregnancy is a victory for us, a victory over the difficult past, over the fears, over everything." "Lauren Harrison," Robert tested. "It's perfect. Our little victory." While waiting for Lauren's arrival, Robert made an important decision. The apartment, as luxurious as it was in a building in the middle of a chaotic city. He wanted his children to grow up with space, with nature with the freedom to run and play. He wanted a real house, a home that was theirs from the foundation up. He bought a large plot of land in a gated community on the outskirts of Chicago, not too far from the city, but far enough to have peace. And then, using all his knowledge in construction, he began to design their dream home. "I want your opinion on everything," he told Julia, showing her the first sketches. "It's our house. It has to reflect both of us." Julia got involved in the project with enthusiasm. She chose colors and layouts and decided she wanted a large and cozy kitchen, not one of those impeccable gourmet kitchens that no one really uses. She wanted a backyard with fruit trees, a playground area for the children, and a garden where she could plant herbs and flowers. The construction progressed quickly, orchestrated by Robert with the same dedication he applied to his commercial projects. Only this time, it wasn't just work. It was love materialized in brick and mortar. Lauren was born on a spring morning, when the flowers in the hospital garden were blooming. The birth was smooth, accompanied by Robert, who held Julia's hand throughout the process. When the baby finally arrived, with a strong and healthy cry, Julia looked at that perfect little face and felt her heart overflow. "She's beautiful," Robert said, marveled, as the nurse placed Lauren in his arms. "Perfect. She looks like you." "She has your eyes," Julia noted, smiling through her tears. Michael, now 2 years old, was introduced to his baby sister at the hospital. He looked at the baby with a mix of curiosity and typical childhood jealousy. But when Lauren held his little finger with her tiny hand, something changed in his face. He looked at his sister and smiled. "Mine," he declared possessively. "Yeah, champ. Your little sister. You're going to take care of her, right?" Michael nodded solemnly, as if he were taking an oath. And from that moment on, he became the most protective brother anyone could wish for. The move to the new house happened when Lauren was 3 months old. It was a spacious ranch-style home with large windows that allowed natural light to enter, and decor that mixed comfort and elegance without being ostentatious. The backyard was immense with green grass, trees, a colorful playground, and even a small pond with fish. "It's perfect," Julia said, walking through the rooms with Lauren in her arms and Michael running excitedly from one side to the other. "It's exactly what a house should be." "It's our home," Robert agreed, putting his arm around her. "Built with love to be filled with love." The months turned into years. Michael grew, curious and intelligent, always asking questions about everything. Robert enrolled him in an excellent school, but also ensured the boy understood the importance of hard work and humility. He frequently took him to visit his construction sites, showing him the laborers working and teaching him to respect all professions. "See that man there?" Robert would point to an experienced bricklayer. "He's an artist. He transforms cement and brick into something beautiful and functional. Never look down on anyone who works honestly." Lauren grew up sweet and determined, a perfect combination of her mother's strength and her father's kindness. She was 2 years old when she took her first steps, straight into the arms of Michael, who waited for her with big brother pride. Julia went back to work, but in a different way. With Robert's support, she opened a small cleaning company that employed other women in vulnerable situations, offering fair wages, benefits, and respect. She never forgot where she came from and used her new position to help other women have a better chance in life. "You're making more of a difference than any donation I've ever made," Robert said proudly when her company turned 1 year old and already employed 20 women. "I'm just giving back. I was given a chance when I needed it most. Now, I can give chances to others." Julia's parents became a constant presence in their grandchildren's lives. The initial regret turned into unconditional love. Her father, once so stern, melted whenever Michael and Lauren were around. Her mother made up for lost time by being the most dedicated and affectionate grandmother possible. "You taught me something important," Julia's father told Robert at a family barbecue in the backyard of the new house. "You taught me that true love knows no conditions or prerequisites. You loved my daughter and my grandson when you had no obligation to do so, simply because they were worthy of love. I should have done the same from the beginning. The important thing is that "We're all together now," Robert replied, watching Julia play with the children on the playground. "The past can't be changed, but the future is ours to build." On a quiet Sunday, 5 years after that rainy dawn when it all began, the family was gathered in the garden. Michael, now 6 years old, was teaching Lauren, now 3, to ride a bike with training wheels. Julia was sitting on a garden swing, watching the scene with a soft smile. Robert sat down next to her, interlacing his fingers with hers. "Do you remember that night?" he asked. "When you typed the wrong number?" Julia laughed softly. "How could I forget? I was so desperate, so scared. I thought it was the end of the world. I never imagined it would be the beginning of everything." "It was the best thing that ever happened to me," Robert said. "That message led me to you, to Michael, to this life we built. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if you had typed the right number." "I prefer not to think about that," Julia said, resting her head on his shoulder. "I prefer to think that maybe it wasn't a mistake. Maybe it was fate, the universe, God, whatever you want to call it, orchestrating everything so that we would find each other. Because you were alone and needed a family, I was needing help and hope, and Michael needed a father. We all needed each other." "Daddy! Mommy! Look at me!" Michael shouted, pedaling proudly with Lauren clapping excitedly behind him. "Well done, champ!" Robert shouted back. "You did it, honey," Julia added. Robert looked at the family he had now, 2 healthy and happy children, a wife he loved with all his being, a house full of life and laughter. He thought about the journey he had made, from the poor boy raised by a single mother to the successful businessman always feeling that something essential was missing. And then he thought about how a simple text message had changed everything. "Do you know what's funny?" he commented. "I spent years building buildings, creating impressive structures of concrete and steel. I thought that was my legacy, my contribution to the world. But now I realize that what really matters is right here. This family, these children we're going to raise to be good people, this love we share. This is the true legacy." "And what a beautiful legacy," Julia agreed, feeling her eyes tear up as they always did when she reflected on how blessed she was. Lauren tripped and fell on the grass, but instead of crying, she laughed and got up on her own, shaking the dirt off her knees. Michael ran to help her anyway, always the protective brother. "They're going to be okay," Robert observed. "We've been raising them with love, with correct values, with the awareness that everything they have is a privilege, not a right. Michael knows he was adopted, that I chose to be his father, and that makes him feel even more loved." It was true. In a delicate conversation when Michael was 5, Robert and Julia told him about the adoption. They explained that Robert wasn't his biological father, but that he had chosen to be his father in every other way. Michael had listened attentively, processed the information with the seriousness of a child, and then said something that would be engraved forever in Robert's heart. "So you chose me? For real?" "For real, champ. Out of all the boys in the world, I chose you." Michael had hugged Robert tightly and whispered, "I would have chosen you too, Daddy." Now, watching the children play, Robert felt a deep gratitude for the life he had. Not for the material wealth, although he recognized the privilege it represented, but for the emotional wealth, for the family that woke up on Sundays to make pancakes together in the kitchen, for the movie nights with popcorn on the sofa, everyone huddled under blankets, for the family dinners where they laughed at silly jokes and shared the events of the day. "I think we should celebrate," Julia suggested suddenly. "Celebrate what?" 5 years since that night. 5 years since you appeared at my door with bags of formula and diapers, like an angel disguised as a businessman. 5 years since our lives changed completely." Robert smiled. "How do you want to celebrate?" "Our way. Simple, true. How about homemade pizza tonight? We can all make it together in the kitchen. Michael loves helping spread the sauce, and Lauren can decorate with the cheese even if she makes a mess." Perfect. Absolutely perfect. And it really was. Later that night, the kitchen was a mess. Flour scattered on the floor, tomato sauce in unlikely places, Michael with cheese on his nose, and Lauren with her hands covered in dough. But laughter filled the air, joy was palpable, and love permeated every messy moment. As the pizzas baked in the oven, filling the house with their delicious aroma, Robert looked around. Julia was wiping Lauren's face with a cloth. Michael was talking excitedly about something that had happened at school, and the dog they had adopted the previous year was sleeping peacefully in his corner. It was a scene of organized chaos, of perfect imperfection, of real life being lived in its most authentic form. "I love you," he said to Julia, loud enough for her to hear over Michael's chatter. She looked at him and smiled that smile that still made his heart race. "I love you too." "We love you guys too," Michael shouted, pulling Lauren into a bear hug that made her scream with joy. Robert gathered the whole family in a group hug, everyone laughing and squeezing together. And at that moment, surrounded by the people he loved, in a house he had built with his own hands, but that they had made a home with their hearts, Robert knew with absolute certainty that he was exactly where he was meant to be. Life wasn't perfect. There were challenges, occasional arguments, difficult moments, but it was real. It was true. It was full of love. And it had all started with a simple typo that turned out to be the most important right move of their lives. That night, after the children went to bed, their bellies full of pizza and their hearts full of happiness, Robert and Julia stood on the house's terrace, watching the stars shining in the clear sky. "Thank you," Julia said softly. "For what?" "For believing. For not giving up. For showing me that happy endings aren't just in fairy tales. For giving me the family I always dreamed of but never thought I'd deserve." "Julia," Robert turned to face her, holding her face between his hands. "You always deserved this and more. Much more. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you know that." They kissed under the stars, husband and wife, partners in life, parents of 2 wonderful children, survivors of difficult pasts, who chose to build a beautiful future together. The wrong message sent in a moment of desperation had led to an unlikely encounter. The encounter had led to an unexpected connection. The connection had flourished into love, and the love had built a family that nothing and no one could destroy. Sometimes, Julia thought as she rested her head on Robert's shoulder, the most accidental mistakes lead to the most perfect destinations. Sometimes the most winding paths lead us exactly to where we needed to be from the start. And there, in that house full of love, with her children sleeping peacefully in their rooms, and a husband who loved her unconditionally, Julia finally understood the true meaning of home. It wasn't about walls or furniture. It wasn't about addresses or zip codes. Home was where love lived. Home was where you were accepted, complete, exactly as you were. Home was those people who chose to stay day after day in every good and challenging moment. And on that starry night, with the soft sound of her children's breathing echoing through the house, Julia and Robert knew they had finally found what they had always sought. They had found home. They had found peace. They had found in each other and in their children the true purpose of life. And it had all started with a simple message, sent to the wrong number, in the darkest hour of the night, which had turned into the light that would illuminate the rest of their lives.